Folks, my name's Charlie Kilpatrick. I'm the current president of the Ulster Grassland Society, and I'd like to give everybody a warm welcome to the 62nd annual conference. And this year, as you're all aware, with the coronavirus pandemic, we're doing this in a completely new format. So bear with us. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this, and hopefully it'll go well for us. Now, tonight's event is the first of 2 evenings of presentations that will focus on the beef and sheep sector. Tomorrow evening, we'll focus on the dairy sector. The theme of this year's conference is a new direction in farming. And this theme follows on from last year's theme, where we focused on getting back to business and looking at business management. Now, as a roll on from that identified there's a real need within all businesses, not just farming, to address specific changes and future challenges. And we want to look at those challenges that face our grass-based livestock sector. So tonight, if we look at our agenda, we've got 2 speakers, 2 excellent speakers. Will be chaired by the immediate president, Jim Freeburn. The first presentation is by sheep farmer Kevin Stewart, who was recently awarded Scottish Sheep Farmer of the Year. This will be followed by a short break when I'll give a very brief presentation to announce the winner of the Ulster Grassland Society Dance Bank Innovation Award. The second speaker, well known, Phelim O'Neill, is a market intelligence specialist for the Irish Farmers Journal. Each speaker will give a presentation lasting approximately 25 minutes, following which Chairman Jim Freeburn will field questions sent in by the audience. Now, just before we kick off here, a bit of housekeeping. All of the audience are automatically muted and your camera's turned off, so we can't hear you. So, but we do want you to ask questions immediately after each presentation, and this will be chaired by Jim. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a question and answer bubble, not the chat box. If you click on that question and answer, you'll get a little screen will come up. You ask your question, and then you press the enter button on your computer, and that will come through to Jim, the chair, to field the question on your behalf. So if anything goes wrong during the evening, leaving and rejoining the session usually fixes it. So switch out and click back in again. This webinar will be recorded, so there'll be a chance to listen to the papers in the future. At the very end of the evening, when we're finished, you'll have when it ends, you will be automatically directed to a web page with the option to complete a survey. So without any ado, I'm going to hand over to immediate past president, Jim Freeburn, to chair the first presentation. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, welcome folks. I hope you can all hear me okay. This is a new adventure for all of us. This is something different, and I'm sure this is the first time we've tried to do this. It's our pleasure to have this conference, albeit virtually, and we have an excellent range of speakers. And our first speaker is Kevin Stewart. Now, Kevin hails from Kelso, which is on the Scottish borders. He was the Scottish Sheep Farmer of the Year in 2019. He is on a predominantly upland farm, and he runs 1,250 ewes, 320 yearlings or gimmers, 970 ewe lambs, 1,100 feeding lambs, 520 ram lambs, and then 100, just to complete the agony, he has 100 summer grazing cattle. The sheep enterprise is based on forage, which is coupled with modern sheep genetics, and you'll hear more about that during this talk, and flock performance is monitored through detailed records. He will outline his current farm business and then explain his plans to adapt to the change.
Jim's broken up there, I think.
Jim, yeah. Will we just get Kevin to start?
Yeah, Kevin to start.
Yeah,
that's great. Thanks.
Kevin, thanks.
Okay, well, Good evening. I would like to thank you for your invite to address you this evening, which allows me a virtual night out in the esteemed company of I think we go back to the first slide at the moment, Jason, please. Thanks. Virtual night out in the esteemed company of the members of the Ulster Grassland Society. Whilst I was preparing for this evening, I note from your excellent website that as a society you were founded in 1959 to promote the management of pastures for optimum production and maximum profit, which is a forward-looking mantra that is as strong today as it was in the post-war years of the 1950s. Indeed, in the post-Brexit era, which I fear as our pig and poultry producers are finding out is going to be as turbulent a period to farming as many of us experiences. The title for this evening is A New Direction for Farming. And I know as a Scottish sheep farmer, I started heading out in a new direction some time ago. And at times it's felt like swimming against the tide, but I think the tide is definitely turning in our direction. And this evening I will try and tell you a bit about what direction in which we are traveling. Next slide, please. The reason why I'm before you tonight is probably, as Jim has already said, we won the Scottish Sheep Farmer of the Year in 2019. And this slide shows us grinning, accepting the award, me, my youngest son and Shepherd. And we were delighted to win the award in the face of stiff competition from other excellent businesses. The judges highlighted our business resilience, use of resources available and adaptation to new genetics and markets as featured that propelled us to the winning slot. And I'll try and take you through the elements that make up our current business and briefly explain why and how we've arrived where we are today and what I feel is a strong position to face the challenges of the future. Next slide, please. This slide shows the land we farm. On the left, the upland farm of Lintonburn Foot, and on the right, the lowland farm of Springhall, Kelso. The motto of our local Grassland and Crop Society is, as you can see, it's no what you hae, it's what you do with what you hae. And I think the judges liked what we do with what we hae. Today I farm 270 hectares in the Tweed Valley. Our base is a 46-hectare farm at Springhall, lovely free draining land on the banks of the Tweed, a mile from Kelso. This is held on a traditional tenancy and is suited to growing anything from potatoes to wheat, but I grow grass and graze sheep on a rotational system. I also farm 185 hectares of steep upland land in the foot of the Cheviots, where our ewe flocks are based. This land rises to 280 metres above sea level, is light and susceptible to drought, but sheep thrive well here. The farm is all down to grass, with areas such as the one on the slide, Whitehill, along with better fields and mixed species swards. The photo shows their deferred grazing earlier in the autumn. This land is farmed on a share type agreement with the owner of the land owning half the ewes, which I contract shepherd, and I pay a rent for the rest of the farm. All costs and output are shared equally. I purchase all owners' lambs as stores in August, and we supplement the grazing on these farms by grazing arable cover crops in Northumberland over autumn and winter, and by growing stubble turnips on neighbouring arable farms. Next slide, please. Change of direction. In my early farming career, and I've always farmed sheep, I produced early fat lambs and also produced and successfully sold Suffolk rams, up to 100 shearlings and ram lambs a year. It was an obvious choice given that we have the world's biggest ram sale on our doorstep, the world famous Kelso ram sales. But at the time, I ran a business with bullet please, high debt, high inputs, high reliance on subsidies, high risk with some high hopes, but low profitability and low satisfaction. There were some high spots, such as just if we can stick with that one a minute, Jason, the previous one. Thank you. There were some high spots, such as the sheep in the picture, which was champion at Edinburgh, Suffolk sale, top price. But I needed consistent results, and I concluded that breeding pedigree sheep wasn't the way to achieve this. I expanded my ewe numbers, and I discovered, to my horror, that the sheep, the rams I've been producing, were incapable of producing lambs consistently without intervention. And furthermore, there were slaughters suck and rise. So our system had created these sheep that were unable to reproduce on their own, which I have to admit came a bit of a shock, and years of heavy feeding and mollycoddling feel like wasted years. So things had to change. I imported New Zealand genetics for my Suffolk flock, but more importantly, research drew me to the Highlander breed, a composite breed from New Zealand, which I crossed over the cleans. And I had to develop new goals to move forward in my business, because I had suddenly realized that it was possible for a ewe to lamb on her own, rear 2 lambs on grass without supplementary feeding, which was at that time almost amazing. Next slide, please. So I tried to step back and create a new series of goals of what I wanted to achieve. Bullets, please. And I wanted to reduce debt, reduce inputs, reduce my reliance on subsidy, increase our output, lower the cost of production, increase profitability, and increase satisfaction, which is a bit of a wish list and a bit of a tall order. But at the time, I was a member of QMS-sponsored big group, Business Improvement Group, which was a group of like-minded farmers who examined each other's businesses, shared financial and production information, and encouraged the recording of basically everything. I was also a member of the SA Sheep Group at the time, led by John Vipond, and that was a group of inspirational sheep men and women who were taking different approaches to sheep farming and willing to share their experiences, the good and the bad. Next slide, please. So the winds of change we encountered in our we embarked and change. Yeah, please, Jason. Yeah. We moved outdoors and we had high lamb losses, which possibly a wrong breed and management. Yes. With lean ewes, poor winter forage and nutrition. Our grassland management, we needed to reduce the use of nitrogen. We had health issues with cobalt deficiency and listeria, and we had light lamb finishing rates. We endeavoured to resolve these problems by changing the breed from Cleans to Highlanders, which were better suited. We dropped out part of our environmental scheme, which delayed our cutting dates for silage, and that allowed us to begin to make high quality silage. We greatly increased the use of clover and adapted new grazing techniques. I set up a contract with my vets, which has led us through to, we now use boluses for cobalt, we'll use additives, and we'll solve the nutrition problems basically. We created a high health status closed flock, where MyDiv now accredited, and we changed the breed, as I said previously, to Highlanders, and we've now managed to lift our dead weights by 1.5 kilos. So a lot of change. Didn't all happen as quick as that slide, but next slide, please. So all this change began about 12 to 13 years ago, and we built up our ewe numbers, as this first slide shows, to a peak of about 2,600 in 2013. I was also contract farming another 1,500 ewes at this period, and we were exceptionally busy. And you can see that the numbers of head are on the left. Our lamb numbers grew along with our ewe numbers, but our lambing percentage, which if you look back to the start of the graph, we're now looking at the right hand axis, was stubbornly low in around the 130s, but we have over the period of 8 to 10 more 10, 12 years, we have managed to lift that back up towards 175%. The next slide, please. So the scans, this figure shows our scans, and because we use cleans and move to Highlanders, our scans have been fairly consistently high. Next, but this shows our number of lambs kept or sold, and again using the left-hand axis, you can see in the early years our lamb percentage was low and stubborn to rise. This is perhaps the figure I'm proudest of. So if we go to the right-hand axis, we can see that we have increased our scan to lamb survival from in the region of 0.7 now up to over 90%, which is, if we go to the next slide, we can see in simple terms really what it all means. So our ewe numbers early on in the process averaged around 2,000. We're scanning at 180%, but we were selling, our true lambing percentage was in 130%, and we were converting 73% of those lambs, those scanned lambs, to sales. More recently, we've reduced our numbers a bit to match labour and allow us to pay more attention to detail. We have scans now scanning 190%. We're lambing at 173%, and that importantly, we're converting those scanned lambs into live sales. And as you can see, with a red arrow, we're now farming 439 ewes less, and we're selling 27 more lambs. So we have had a wee bit of success over the years. Next slide, please. So where are we now? The flock is a close flock, as I mentioned. It's high health, based on the maternal Highlander breed, lambing at 170+%, and we also have terminal flocks of Abermacs and Aberblack ewes. We produce 180 grass-fed rams for the breeding company Innovis annually, and this year we averaged 824. They're sold on index at a fixed price online and through the sale rings at a fixed opening bid. We sell breeding females, 400 gimmers and 250 lambs to regular customers, and we have effectively become their closed flock. And we are selling 1,000+ prime lambs, and our average dead weight this year is 19.8%. When we had the cleans, we were around the 18%. 94%, as you can see, were R3L or better. And in fact, in December, the cooperative we sell through Farm Stock, we won the prize for the most lambs in spec for the month, which was timely. And that was a pen of 85 Highlander ram lambs. So the breed is producing right across the range. Next slide, please. So Grassland and Forage. We manage a wide range of grassland types. We use a mix of rotational paddock grazing and mob grazing. We have dramatically reduced the use of nitrogen, but maintained the fertility of our land. We have adjusted to some of the drought situations we're in by mixed species swards, targeting different species. We've been doing some trials with cocksfoot again, and that has increased our live weight gains. We essentially, in winter, all our sheep, and we really make high quality and high protein silage, which is the base of our system, I suppose. And finally, yeah, we use arable cover crops grown on arable farms and stubble turnips. We grow these off farms. It gives us clean grazing, and we've created beneficial partnerships with local arable farmers. Next slide, please. Right, the goals I set myself: reduce borrowings. We've managed to do this pretty dramatically, and we have achieved that from within business. We've reduced our inputs and costs. For example, there's our ewe feed costs in 2008, £8 a ewe. Last year, 282 a ewe. We've increased our output. as we saw in the previous slides, by the maximising our unit margin, high output, low variable costs, and we've matched this really with utilising the ewes strength, minimal intervention. We have reduced our reliance on subsidy. Part of this has been due to a change in the area of land that we've farmed, but last year it was 12% of our income, and this incoming year it's going to be 5% of our income. So we're kind of not immune to cuts, but we're maybe more prepared. We have increased the consistent levels of profitability, which was something that we were lacking before. We try and keep our capital spending low, and we assess any purchases on a return on capital. And part of this, that we use contractors for silage work, establishment of crops. We get up-to-date equipment, and we know our costs exactly. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the Highlander before. The Highlander has been really my route to a more efficient business. She is, as you can see in the slide, she's an efficient ewe. The Highlander ewe to the ram will average about 66 kilos. They are ideal for outdoor lambing, easy lambing. We really don't lay a finger on them. They are prolific, as you can see from our earlier scans, and they are vigorous. And because of these aforementioned things, they have managed to increase our lamb numbers sold, and as such reduced our cost of production. Next slide, please. All our ewes are recorded, and we recorded Highlanders with this Highlander index, which I don't know if you can see all the traits we record for, but we measure carcass and growth, so that lambs finish off grass and grade well. We measure lamb ease, lamb survival, vigour. I'm not sure how it works because that's the computer side, but there is an element of the program that restricts the ewes from gaining weight and gaining size, so that they maintain their efficient size. We measure mothering ability, and then also number of lambs reared, etc. And as you can see, over the last 5 years, progress has really been fairly consistently heading in the right direction. Next slide, please. We also sell Abermax terminal sire as well, and whilst we record some of the same traits, this is a terminal sire, there is more emphasis on muscle depth and carcass grading, fat depth, etc. But equally, we pay big attention to lambing ease, and the slide there shows that in 2014 that almost half needed intervention at lambing time, rising to today where less than 10% need intervention. So the recording allows us to make the correct decisions and in this instance produces the correct results. Next slide, please. So I will now try and give you a quick visual run through our sheep system. We farm in the east of Scotland, generally a drier part of the country. We are, as my neighbour tells me, we live in the second driest parish in Scotland. I don't know quite where the first one is, but we do appear to be suffering more extremes. So the left-hand slide shows rams on rotation at Spring Hall, low ground, prior to the sales, and the right-hand slide shows ewe hogs grazing turnips, 10 days ago. So we have to produce a system that can handle all conditions. Next slide, please. All our ewes are housed from New Year. and they turned out to grass in late March onto pre-lambing covers. And these fields have been rested since, some of them since early December. We winter shear all our ewes when we house them. It allows us the ewes are much more comfortable inside, as you can see here. We house them in big groups and up to 250 in a group. Really simple. We've adapted many sheds for it, but we just use round feeders, silage, and they're on straw. And this allows us, our farm is steep and awkward in winter, and it allows us just to manage our ewes through the later weeks of gestation. And clearing the grass has made a dramatic difference in what we turn them out to. Next slide, please. Forage and cover crops, as I mentioned, we graze, send ewe hogs down into Northumberland, down near the coast. So the picture on the left is ewe hogs grazing on the 12th of January, just turned onto a fresh cover crop, which was of oats and rye. That was direct drilled into wheat stubbles in late August. And we graze those stubbles right down to basically nothing. On the right, these are sheep grazing the same field as the one with snow in, just on a better day. These stubble turnips are sown into winter barley stubbles. This one was sown in late July, and we take out volunteers. It has this is where we do use a bit of nitrogen. We need to develop a good crop. So as you saw, if we get snow in the winter, we're able to, the shaw will allow the snow to protect the turnips. Next slide, please. Utilising grass growth, as I said, we manage a wide variety of soil types. So on the left-hand side, there's a paddock being dropped out of rotation for silage, and we're finding we're getting really good quality silage off these paddocks that have been, basically we just jumped a couple of paddocks there too. And on the right, we have the declared grazing. As a drought prone farm, we can either use this land as a buffer in the summer, or if we don't need it then, we will graze it in late autumn. So it's an insurance policy, because we really can suffer from drought. Next slide, please. The ram sale side of our business that has become increasingly important to us. We sell maternal Highlander at the top there, Suffolks and Aber Black. Aber Black's a composite Suffolk that is, well, lambs easily and grows fast and suitable for lambing outside as well. The Aber Max is the same, white face, lambs easily, grows very quickly, and works well in many systems. We sell these rams through Innovis, who describe themselves as the leading supplier of sheep breeding technologies to the UK. All the rams are grass fed. We use no concentrate feeds whatsoever. They're capable of meeting high numbers of ewes, and they're also recorded with index. Next slide, please. The ram sales, we run an on-farm ram sale where the sheep are presented at a fixed price and purchasers are able to bid them up, if you like. We also sell rams online, which are at a fixed price. The rams are sold, they're all MOT'd, they're the 3 T's, the teeth, testicle and toes, are all examined prior to sale. They're quarantine dose and sold with a guarantee. They're tested for border disease and vaccinated for Ionis. So they're really as safe a purchase as you can get, and they seem to work for people. Next slide, please. We also sell breeding females, as So on the left-hand side is a group of Highlander cross Aberfieldy lambs, which go to customers who are effectively using us as their closed flock. Seems to be working for them and us. And on the right-hand side is an example of prime lambs. There's a Highlander cross Abermax lambs destined for slaughter. The prime lambs this year have averaged 19.8 kilos and currently sitting at 89 pounds, and we still have some to go, so they're likely to rise. Next slide, please. In our business, we have some, these are not very good photos, but we have some essential bits of kit. The Racewell Auto Drafter, really without the technology that this machine provides us with, we wouldn't be able to run our business. It allows us to data capture. We use with a true test weigh head, and it's also fantastic for drafting sheep and treating, we carry out regular weighings, etc. on it. The jetter in the middle allows us to manage our, we don't use pour-ons at all, we use dip, and it's even active, and we use, it's much cheaper, high output, works very well. And on the right is a pretty scrappy looking fencing trailer, but it works a treat and allows us to put up miles of high speed fencing, which is essential to managing our grass. Next slide, please. Yeah, we keep our costs down by not having our heads turned by too much shiny equipment. An old 12-year-old tractor, an 8-year-old bike, and a 20-plus-year-old forklift. All been well maintained, all work well, but in our circumstances, they manage to keep our costs down and allow us to do our job. Okay, next slide, please. I think we're doing okay for time, but
Good, thank you.
That kind of has been a quick run through my business and how we've changed from what was an unsustainable and unprofitable system to a business which I feel is well placed to face the future. It's now profitable and it's also an enjoyable business to work in. So your secretary asked me, I don't know if we have time, but he asked me to comment on a few issues. I think, is there another bullet, Jason, maybe? Yeah. Brexit and the post-Brexit outlook for sheep. My own Brexit planning has led me to streamline my business a wee bit recently. We had some grazing land that's been 20 miles away that we have chosen to give up, and we've replaced growing cereals at home with growing grass. And this has led us to have a small reduction in ewe numbers, but lifestyle and the age of the farmer also made it seem like a sensible thing to do at this time. Having achieved a last-minute Brexit deal, we still have access to Europe that accounts, as we know, for about 30% of the lambs we produce in Europe, albeit no doubt with some added cost. But I think the most importantly, the uncertainty that has hung over the sheep industry for the last few years has hopefully been removed. And I think the future really can be bright for our industry, but I think we have to produce sheep in an efficient manner. And unfortunately, there are still too many producers out there that are managing to do that. So with my rose-tinted glasses on, I hope that the pandemic has altered the nation's eating habits and introduced many people to lamb for the first time, and as consumption has increased over the year, but time will tell. Environment and carbon, well, both hot topics that do and will continue to affect our profitability. I think it's right that as an industry we care for our environment, and I think we've probably all become a bit careless, at the very least with our soil management and our use of inputs, and we have to begin to redress the balance of nature whilst maintaining production. In Scotland, our Minister states that food production will remain at the heart of Scottish Government policy, but will be driven with strong environmental gains in mind. As a livestock business, I know we're going to come under increasing pressure to be carbon efficient, and I feel that we really must be efficient livestock producers to succeed in this. And the other succession, George, for succession, we need the need for a steady supply of young people who can make a good standard of living in agriculture is a tricky topic. In my own case, due to, I suppose, the early slog of my career, I successfully steered my offspring to find their own way in life, which they have done. 2 of them are involved in agriculture, so we may have a way forward in due course. My shepherd who works for me came initially from a dairy release, progressing through apprenticeship to now fully fledged and valued employee. And we're about to mentor a new apprentice in a scheme run by our machinery ring. So it is possible. And I think that's, so I think I've gone on long enough. I've probably run over my time. So thank you again for the invite. It has been an honor to talk to you. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent, Kevin. You've kept strictly to time, which is great. We have a number of questions for you, and we'll start off with some of the easier ones. You picking me up?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Right. When did you first import Highlander genetics? When did that journey begin?
I did that way back in around about 2006-07. They were brought into this country by a company, Rissington Breedline, and one of the guy happened to just live in Kelso, which was fortuitous. So we bought some rams, and then we went to New Zealand and saw them in their own environment, and was pretty impressed by them. So we fast forwarded after that. Yeah.
And what attracted you at that time?
I suppose it was an easy fix to the problems we were having, or it looked like an easy fix. That we were having difficulties with survival and lambing cleans. It's pretty open, the land we were using, but the Highlanders seemed to be further down the track, and given that they all lambed outside basically where they came from, and they had lots of get up and go, and it pretty much transformed our situation just by introducing the rams to start with. So we then bred them pure after that.
Okay. Good. We have another question here. If you could expand on the contract with the vet, how did that come about, and what is your contract really?
Our contract is that we set up a contract that we don't pay for any visit charges, and I pay them an annual fee. Basically we were initially, I think we were troubleshooting, and I wanted to get ahead of the curve, so we set that up. So the vet comes, it's meant to be every month, it's not quite as often as that, but once every 6 weeks the vet will come, whether we have a problem or not. We don't actually have them very much for calls now, but they come and they will have a look at a group of sheep, and we'll discuss things. We had a vet health plan for many years before it was in vogue, and it just means that we use the vet for advice, and it's probably we speak to my vet a couple of times a week. And it works really well, and they've actually now expanded that on a wider basis throughout our practice to include other. They've created a sheep club, and all the members have a contract.
You've set the trend.
It did, but they didn't give them it for nothing, unfortunately.
Well, another question here. The average ewe weight, I think you did mention, was 66 kilos. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much the weight of our ewes when we put them to the ram. and we did find they were creeping up a wee bit, but since we have begun to, as we get further into the recording, we're able to, the index is weighted, and we're able to hopefully maintain that in and around that is an efficient weight.
Okay.
Those ewes are weaning about, at spinning time, they're spinning about 56 kilos of lamb. So they're not far off producing their own weight.
Yes, indeed. That's very commendable. Are all Highlander ewes bred to Highlander rams?
No, we cross some of our lower end index ewes. We cross them to the Aberfield, which gives us a Highlander mule, if you like. We've also successfully used them we've used the Aber terminal sires on them. They're highly versatile ewes, but they are really well suited to a closed flock situation, breeding your own replacements.
Okay. The next question here is to do with you seem to capture a lot of data on your farm. What key performance indicators do you feel that sheep farmers should be using and monitoring?
Well, I think just as I don't know whether it's purely by accident, but I've recorded my scan to lamb figures since way back in 2006, and that's been a thing that drove me, whilst consumed me to improve, because so I think and that's directly related to output. So I think that's a massively important one. Other things that we monitor are weight gains in our lambs, and we try and not worm them on a 3-week cycle, if you like. We will watch them until we see if the gains are starting to slip. And sometimes we have been doing some trials with selective targeting of wormers by live weights, especially when we're feeding prime lambs. If the live weight gain starts to slip and they're nearing weight, we will kill them, basically.
You haven't tried fecal egg counts or anything like that?
We do, yes, we do that. That's part of it. That works in with our vet contract. That's part of our contract, that they do we do the sampling and they do the counts. I have tried doing the counts myself, but my eyes are too dodgy.
There's another one here on the same sort of theme, worming strategy, and you may have given us a hint of it.
Yeah, we try and use as little. We are a sheep-only farm with a few cattle in the summer, so we are highly reliant on wormers. So we run regular efficacy tests, but we've also been using working with Morden Morden Institute targeted treatments. So on live weight gain, using the racewell, and I would say I'm still yeah, we're not finished with that one yet, but it's not foolproof, but it I think, depending on the season, if you've got too heavy a challenge, I think you maybe have to override it.
Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. Next question: the labour input in your system.
There is me and a full-time shepherd. We have, as I mentioned just at the end there, we have reduced our acreage slightly by giving up some grazing land a distance away. So we actually have just entered a labour sharing agreement with a couple of other farms. So my shepherd is working a couple of days off farm. So there's basically two of us, which we supplement at busy times with the contract labour. But so two people basically. But yeah.
That's amazing with the numbers you have. You must have very good systems for handling and things like that, have you?
We have got big capacity, and we use those sheds that we winter the sheep in, and basically with flexible mobile pens within them, but we can handle a lot of the sheep at once, and we've got quite a lot of barking dogs.
Okay. Another question here, really. Composite breeds, do you believe that they're more worm and disease resistant than other native breeds?
Probably not. I think they're still sheep, so they have to be managed well. There are maybe some breeds, some native breeds that appear to be more susceptible to worms. They are. We don't really worm our Highlander ewes at all. Some leaner ewes prior to lambing we will worm before turnout, but the bulk of them we don't. So maybe the answer to that is possibly yes.
Okay. Moving on, and we're going to take maybe 2 more questions, and here's one here. What forage crops are you growing? Some idea of the planting time and when you graze them and all the rest.
Yeah, stubble turnips are a mainstay for us. As I mentioned, we're pretty much, and on our at Kelso here, there's a lot of arable land round about us. A lot of guys who have been possibly guilty of growing nothing but cereals and are in need of livestock on their farm, and there's some people are realizing that. So we try to team up with people who ideally will let us in after winter barley, which is difficult because they all want to sow oilseed rape after winter barley. But we are in partnership with a guy at the moment, and we sow stubble turnips immediately as out the field in ideally late July. We direct drill those in, and we use a mixture of varieties, Samson and Delilah, which I think gives us a bit of maybe it's biblical protection, but it gives us I think it gives us better disease resistance. And just having had that frost, I think the Delilah is proven to be slightly more frost resistant. We have to take out the volunteers on those crops because these guys with their massive combines, they go too fast basically, but that's okay. And we give them in old money about 65 units of nitrogen, and we graze tup hogs, growing tup hogs on them, and ewe hogs, and with ewe hogs on there from mid-December to early March, and works brilliantly.
Good. This is going to be the last question. I apologize to those because there are at least 13 in, and we've only answered about 8 of them at this point. Do you use rubber ring? Do you ring male lambs intended for slaughter?
No, we don't. All our lambs, all our male lambs are left entire. We're geared up to handling rams anyway because we produce rams, but all our male lambs are left entire, and we're getting really good results for them. I think it's giving us a bit more weight, and we're not really finding any issues by doing that. So no is the answer.
I'll just take one more question. This one is, where do you find the best place for getting advice or guidance on making strategic changes and decisions on your farm?
That's a tricky one. A wide range of we subscribe to SEC, and we bounce a lot of stuff off them. They've changed their name. Can't remember what they're called now. Something rural, and we use online information. We're being involved with Innovis. They do a lot of research, and they're involved in a good lot of stuff. Member of, as I said, of the SEC sheep group, which has been a great great group to be a member of, with open-minded and at times half-daft people, but they're been really valuable. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Kevin. I'm going to bring it to an end for this first set. Certainly by the quality of your presentation and the number of and diversity of the questions, you certainly have been a real asset for this evening. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, I'm just going to take over for a couple of minutes. Kevin, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. And Jim, thanks for chairing that one. I'm going to hand back to Jim in 5 minutes. Folks, this is a 5-minute presentation in between the speakers. I'm sorry we can't take more time to do this Innovation Award, but 2020, completely different year than usual. Due to coronavirus restriction, the Society was unable to run the Grassland Farmer of the Year competition. So as an alternative, with the support from Danske Bank, we launched the Ulster Grassland Society Danske Bank Grassland Innovation Awards competition. Sponsored by Danske Bank, the awards are seeking to celebrate all things innovation by capturing the on-farm inventions and ideas that are helping local farmers to be more progressive and efficient. Applications for the competition took the form of a series of short videos, and the scope of the competition allowed for a wide range of ideas to be submitted, from novel devices for grazing infrastructure to different ways of managing grazing or establishing swards, right through to new methods of monitoring animal performance. So we had a very wide range of entries, and I would like to thank those members who submitted their videos. The quality was of a very high standard, but unfortunately we're unable to show the videos tonight. Now, the winning and commended videos, which I'm going to award in a minute, they'll be made available on the Ulster Grassland Society website in the coming days. And there will be more press coverage on this in the weeks to come. It's my pleasure tonight to announce that Kilkeel beef and sheep farmer, James Henderson, is the overall winner. His innovation looked at how new technology could be used on the farm to easily provide increased information on animal performance to aid decision-making in his beef and sheep enterprises. We also, as well as that, we had 2 highly commended entries, those of dairy farmers Albo O'Neill and Andrew Wright. Now, before I sign off here, I would like to give thanks especially to Dr. Debbie McConnell of AFBI for doing a lot of work to lead this competition and get it up and running, and also to Rodney Brown of Danske Bank for his support and sponsorship. Thank you very much again, folks. So I've rushed through that. I'm sorry we can't spend more time on that. During our usual conference, we take more time with us. So I'm going to hand you back to Jim Freeburn, and he'll introduce our next speaker. Thanks. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, folks.
Right, thank you for that, and congratulations to our prize winners for this very innovative. It became, because of COVID, really, that the Innovation Awards became thought about, and thanks to those farmers that participated. We're now going to move on to our second speaker of this evening. Probably needs no introduction to most of the people that are part of this webinar. It's Phelim O'Neill, and certainly we're very pleased to have this local talent. And Phelim is a market intelligence specialist with the Irish Farmers Journal. He's a Queen's University law graduate, so just be careful what you say to him. He could take it in the wrong context. Phelim has held a number of roles in Northern Ireland meat industry, and very challenging ones they have been too. He was certainly he was in the marketing manager within the Livestock and Meat Commission, and certainly that was not at an easy time whenever BSE was to the fore. And then also to Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Meat Exporters Association. He joined the Irish Farmers Journal in 2015. Certainly He has been very innovative in looking at new approaches and finding out what is happening within various regions within the world. And he's going to give us some of his findings and look at the challenges facing the beef and sheep sector post-Brexit and into the future. Hand over to you, Phelim. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you to the Ulster Grassland Association for the invitation to join you this evening. Obviously, like so many others, it'll be so much more pleasant to be doing it in person, but I think we have a viable alternative, if you like, to get us through these times. As the title that I'm going to talk to this evening is Northern Ireland's place in the global beef and sheep market. So it will be a little bit of a world tour. And I'll try and zone in on a few things in particular in the next 20 or 25 minutes or so that will hopefully be of some interest to the audience. And anyone that grows grass, the main reason that they do it is to produce livestock for whatever purpose, whether it's beef, sheep, dairy, whatever. And the most important thing, once they have run their farm to as efficient a stage and standard as they can, is to get the most out of the marketplace for that product. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at prices and where Northern Ireland fits in that scene. We're also going to take, because the UK is our main market outlet, we're going to spend a little bit of time just looking at the market supply and the value of that market. Its dependency on imports in some categories, and also what effect or what changes that we have seen in the past 12 months, and they've been pretty dramatic there, I assure you. Once we go beyond the UK then, and this is more important in the sheep meat sector, as Kevin alluded to there, the EU market is our next stop, less important on beef, but significant nonetheless. And the things then that affect us now and going into the future is what is going on in global trade. And I suppose if we'd been talking 6 months ago, there would have been a very strong focus on Brexit. I will have a very brief, I think I have one slide dedicated to it this evening. It'll be a brief reference to it, but there is a bigger space and a bigger discussion area perhaps in the wider trade deal concept and how that might impact on our sector. And the final topic then I'm going to say just a little bit about is PGI. And the application that would have made the headlines or made the news to some extent in farming circles before Christmas, with the Republic of Ireland making an application for grass-fed PGI that Northern Ireland is going to be granted, or so they've committed to anyway, granting the opportunity to join that at a future date when they're ready to do so. So first thing to say, and just picking up from the LMC bulletin last weekend, is the Northern Ireland beef price is at a reasonably good point. I think we could agree. Anytime that we're over 380 a kilo or thereabouts, I think it's something that we would have to look at, and we will see as we go on over the next few slides. That's probably as good as it can be, as good as it can get. We're certainly running well ahead of the 5-year average. And you know, last year, a very turbulent year. We had a very bad spot in the immediate aftermath of the shutdown of society in March, but we have been progressively recovering since then, and sit at a good place at the minute. And just to maybe illustrate that a bit more or put it in context, I've just pulled out a couple of graphs here to show that. The one on the left is one that was taken actually from the weekend on 13th of February. I've done this in the context of the southern side of our paper, the Farmers Journal being an Island of Ireland publication. So therefore, my information and my prices here are in euro, but I think the graphs and the bars show the same. We've benchmarked it off the Irish price, and you can see there that Northern Ireland is actually running 66 cent per kilo ahead. That would be equating to something in around 250 euro per head, 66 cent a kilo, sorry. That would be equating to about 250 euro a head on a 380 kilo animal. The other exceptional performer at the minute, interestingly enough, is Australia. But they're in very unique circumstances. Their herd is at its lowest point in 20 years. There'd been a major slaughter out program there during a prolonged drought period that ended about this time last year. They're in a major herd rebuilding exercise at the minute. And then we look, as we move right on that, we can see just that the countries that are out in the wider world that are
a good bit lower, if you like, than the Republic of Ireland, an awful lot lower than Northern Ireland and the other UK regions, with New Zealand currently being of the major exporting countries in the world having the weakest price. The graph on the right then just is really another presentation of this, and you can see here that over the period of time going back into this time last year, that the disparity between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland has been broadly consistent. It's never been as high as it is at the minute, but there is consistently a price gap there. Republic of Ireland prices tend to track the EU average, whereas Northern Ireland prices will be broadly in line with the rest of the UK, although indeed there's at times there's a gap there too. Just very quickly then to look at the rest of the world. I touched them there a little bit in the bar graph, but this is just pulling the slide down from the EU Commission that shows what is where, and you can see they've taken GB there. You could have taken UK. We're generally basically at the top of that three when it comes to price. So on beef, we're as good as it gets. And then if we maybe take a quick look at sheep meat as well, and interestingly, in terms of sheep meat production, there are a number of countries in the world that are major traders in beef. There are really two that particularly matter in sheep meat. That's Australia and New Zealand. The number 3 exporter of sheep meat in the world is actually the UK, and the number 4 is Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. So you can see how it's quite a confined thing. The biggest producer actually of sheep meat is China, but of course it's not traded. They're a net importer of it. And again, Kevin didn't touch much on prices earlier there, but this is a particularly good time to be a sheep farmer. You know, we're looking at prices there that I think if we could lock into those for a long-term deal, we would certainly take it on. And look, combination of factors there. There was less lambs produced in the UK last year. There was the Brexit uncertainty space. The other reality is that, and I'll come back and talk a bit more about this later, New Zealand has focused more on China than Europe in recent times. Australia numbers are lower there as well. So we're in a very good, strong position on sheep meat prices here as well. So that's good news so far. Again, just very quickly to look at that, where you can see Northern Ireland actually makes it onto this graph and towards the top of the pile. So last word in prices, we're probably at the point where it's as good as it gets. And what is driving that, or what leaves us in the good position, particularly on beef? It very much comes down to the fact that as part of the UK, we're operating in what is a deficit market when it comes to supply. 20% more beef is consumed in the UK than is produced in the UK. They are major net importers of it. The red tractor is the required standard of supply, if you like, to the major retail outlets. And that means that Northern Ireland has access to the best of the best markets within the UK as well. I'll not go through those figures there line by line, because if I was to do that, all the slides would be here all night. But if you contrast the position where Northern Ireland is selling into a market where there's a 20% deficit in supply compared to the demand, and contrast that with the Republic of Ireland, who export 90% of the beef that they produce, consuming just 10%. In fact, there is more Irish beef consumed in the UK and Britain than there is in the Republic of Ireland itself. And just very quickly to look at that there, the graph on the left in particular to focus on, just to mention briefly the graph on the right, UK is a very substantial exporter of beef as well as importer. The reason for that is that there are parts of the carcass and indeed in the offals, the hearts, the livers, etc., where they're not particularly popular cuts within the UK market. Those tend to be exported mainly to continental Europe, some beyond into global markets. And that is backfilled then, if you like, by importing the cuts that they want. Biggest suppliers, the Republic of Ireland, there were points last year that they were supplying 80% of all of the UK imports. And Kevin mentioned earlier there the dread that hung over the sheep sector on exports. That dread would have hung over the Irish industry in terms of no deal had been arrived at. Whatever the flaws might be with the deal, it would have been worse without it. And this is a bit, I think, that certainly brings joy to my eyes every time that I look at it. And it helps to explain as well the strong position that the industry is in at the minute, and has been indeed since we started that recovery back in the late spring last year. These are numbers that I've never seen before, and I've been kicking around this industry a lot longer than I want to admit at this stage. But if you look at beef consumption there through retail, and this is predominantly supermarkets now, there's still a handful of butchers in Britain, but they are certainly a dwindling number, a lot smaller than they are here. But we have year-on-year volume sales up, and this is the year to the 24th of January 2021. Year-on-year volume sales are up 12.4%. Sorry, but the spend was up 15.5%. So I've noticed a typo there. Spend was up 15.5%. So that was very, very welcome news. And then if you look at it even and come in, bring that in a bit closer, and you look at the last quarter, the 12 weeks up to the 24th of January, that picture is basically maintained. The volume's up 13%, the spend's up almost 16%. So you can see there's very, very strong retail demand there for beef. And it's actually repeated on lamb, maybe not just as spectacular, but still very significant. The year on year there is up 6.3% on volume. The spend's up 11.5%. When you bring it forward to the period over Christmas, and again, if you think about lamb, you think about sheep meat, it's very much a festive meat. Easter is what it tends to be associated with in the Christian calendar. Ramadan and Eid, in terms of the Muslim calendar, are the feasts around where there's big buying patterns. So given the year and the Christmas that we've had with so much or so little, if you like, out of home consumption, it's quite clearly evident there that lamb sales would have done very well on the back of that. I put in a note of warning there in describing this as awesome performance. We have to remember that there is the pandemic dimension to this, that there is no out-of-home eating to speak of really for much of the last year, and that this is retail performance only. So from that point of view, the pandemic, with all its frustrations and all of the problems and all of the bereavement that it has caused, it has certainly driven a demand for the products that comes off our grass. And you know, it's no coincidence that in terms of in the corporate world, the major retailers have been big winners over the last 12 months as well. So something I think that we grab, that we appreciate, but that we be mindful. You know, these numbers have never appeared on a screen before in my lifetime. If you had on sheep meat consumption, if you had a period that went up by 1% or 0.5%, you were very likely to get two that followed it that went down by 1% or 0.5%. So these are the sort of numbers that I think we can appreciate, and hopefully we can hold them whenever we do open up again, go back into some sort of a normal supply situation. Again, a slight difference in terms of sheep meat, again, as Kevin alluded to, UK is a major exporter of sheep meat, and it's predominantly to the European Union, which is a deficit market. The UK is 108% self-sufficient. It produces more sheep meat than it needs. And that's before we get into the discussion on carcass balance, where we import the parts of the lamb that we consume more of, and we export the ones that we don't. But the EU overall is a deficit market for sheep meat, and therefore it's a ready-made export market for the UK and indeed Ireland as well, of course. And we have seen that in a Northern Ireland context, the way that manifests itself. Well, numbers were down last year, certainly for several years there. There have been in excess of 400,000 Northern Ireland lambs would go in south for processing. So we had very much an island of Ireland market on sheep meat. Lambs processed in Northern Ireland, good number of them will tend to be done by the factories that are supplying the supermarkets with beef as well. So that is the nature of that business. But the difference and why the deal was very important for the sheep meat sector is to allow lamb be sold in continental markets without tariffs. There's plenty of other issues around veterinary certification and customs declarations, but that's another debate perhaps for another time. And just to spend a moment looking at the drivers of sales in Britain, you know, this is the major retailers here, the top 10 of them. It's AHDB information. They do a regular survey on it. And you can see that in that there, the very, very big commitment that is to beef, and to a slightly lesser extent sheep meat, because again, it's getting the cuts that they want in the mix that they want. Only 3 of the top 10, there's the biggest 3, Sainsbury, Tesco and Asda, will use another source of beef, and that's Irish beef. And you can see there the percentage, maybe they're a bit small. Asda tends to be the biggest user of Irish beef, perhaps up to a third of it. Their beef will be Irish. Looking then at Sainsbury, over 90 in beef there this time around, what is it, 82% or thereabouts is from UK supply, the remainder from Ireland, and then Tesco, the other one, 75-77% over the last two periods that are surveyed. So you can see that the vast majority of what they offer, and then all of the rest, of course, 100% UK. Northern Ireland, and it has to be a red tractor standard to get access to those markets. Northern Ireland Farm Quality Assured fits the bill there, and is part and an equivalent scheme and recognised as such in that. Moving on to the rest of the world. Just to put a little bit of a flavour or context in, in terms of size and volume of it, 2021, the world production will be just over 60 million tonnes, 61.2 million tonnes according to USDA. The amount traded will be about 10.8 million tonnes, and you can see there that there's a number of blocks or countries that would be very much dominant in both the import, the exports and imports. We'll just focus on the exporters first here. And the top three haven't changed really in God knows how long. Brazil has leapfrogged up to #1 spot. They're likely to stay there. They're expected to export in excess of 2 million tonnes this year. Australia's slipping back a bit because of the herd rebuilding process that they're going through. And the US, they're quite unique actually in that they're one of the world's biggest exporters of beef. They're in the top three, and similarly they're in the top three importers as well. Again, to get carcass balance, we'll come on to the import slide in a minute. Won't go down through the rest and spend too long on to just note Argentina have become a major exporter again. India exporter buffalo into other Asian markets. They tend not to come near Europe, but certainly Argentina and Uruguay do. Paraguay to a slightly lesser extent. And if we move on then, just in terms of, well, who are the importers of beef? Moving into this, you can see here that, and we talked about it earlier, but the UK being a deficit market, they're in fact the 6th biggest import market in the world for beef. But the story of the world beef trade in the past decade has been just how China has completely taken off. They're now approaching 3 million tonnes carcass weight equivalent. If I was to rewind back and produce a slide for this time 10 years ago at the start of the last decade, that would have been something around 100,000 tonnes or thereabouts. It was a negligible amount. So that market has simply mushroomed in the last year. And if we talked about just over 10 million tonnes traded, a third of that is actually imported by China. That is the market in the world that has serious potential. It's going to level off, and it's been sort of massive year-on-year growth. It's expected to level off this year according to USDA reports, but there's still a lot of potential left in other Asian countries and developing economies. Thinking I've name-checked Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, but there are other Asian countries that are developing as well. And even the established developed countries like Japan, South Korea, if you look at the trend line on them, their imports of beef have been increasing as well. So whilst the market in Europe, UK, North America is pretty much flat, maybe declining slightly, there's certainly plenty of growth potential in Asian markets. And for people that want to get into exports further afield, it's the place to look at. Now, of course, remember, going back to the prices earlier, those markets are all being supplied by countries at the minute that have a different price point than Northern Ireland is. EU market and what EU trade it matters to Northern Ireland in a secondary way, because as I say, whilst the rest of the UK is the main export market, we do still sell significant quantities to the European Union. And if you take a look at it in the context of exports, there is no major global export market for European beef. You can see that 503,000 tonnes of it there goes to others, if you like. That's all over the place. Israel, Hong Kong, Ghana for low value cuts of beef. Philippines are the ones that merit a listing in their own right. It's a different picture on the import side, whereas you look, the big supplier there in the yellow box is Brazil, followed by Argentina in the bluey green color, and Uruguay in the red, USA in the black. And between them, the South American countries would account for 75% or thereabouts of all EU imports. A lot lower in 2020 for the very simple reason that the main area that these products is mainly steak meat that's imported to the European Union, and the main outlet for those is through the restaurant and the hospitality sector, and that market simply hasn't been there in the past year. So that's why you see it declining. It had been slipping anyway, but it has slipped noticeably in the past 12 months. And again, we'll not spend too much on that, but the point to be made here is, and just if we take the graph on the left, first of all, and we just take the last figure, and you can see there that in terms of Europe, the exports twice as much beef as it imports. The exports in the blue, the imports in the red. 240,000 ton imported, 491,000 ton exported. But then look at the value, of that, in value terms, the imports are 1.3 million euros, the exports are 1.1. That reflects the fact that the main cuts of beef that are imported are steak meat cuts from South America, and it's the very low value cuts that's exported to Asian and African markets. So something worth bearing in mind. The value of the European market is something much more interesting, the value, than the volume for those that are trading it. Just in terms of sheep meat trade, again, there are two players that matter here: Australia, New Zealand. And on sheep meat, the thing to note about New Zealand, they have a 228,000 ton quota for the European Union, the EU 28 as it was then. It's currently being discussed, shall we say, how that's apportioned between the UK and the EU. It was ironically one of the things that the EU and the UK agreed on very early on in discussions, how that would be divided. They would basically take who got what over the last 5 years, and they would divvy up the quota accordingly. New Zealand wouldn't entertain that. They wanted to retain the right to send the whole 228,000 ton to either the UK or whatever EU country that they choose to do. So it's currently being discussed, shall we say. Australia have a very small presence in the market because they simply don't have the quota to do that. I'll come back around to quotas and trade in a minute again. And I mentioned earlier about the EU consuming more sheep meat than it produces. 96% self-sufficient is the 2021 forecast. And that means that it is a lucrative market that Australia in particular want to get into. Not so much New Zealand, because they're doing a lot of business in China. I mentioned just on the topic of China, up until 2018, the EU was New Zealand's most important export market for sheep meat. Since then, it has been China, and I was looking just at that little black spot there, 2020-2021. That's they start their year on the 1st of October. And the reality is, over the last 5 years, that's the lowest volumes that have went to Europe from New Zealand. And that is part of why we have a very buoyant sheep meat market in Europe at the minute for both Irish and UK exporters. There simply isn't the level of competition from New Zealand that there had been previously. Again, don't need to spend too long on this. As I said, there's two countries that matter when it comes to exporting sheep meat: Australia and New Zealand. The importers, again, China, Hong Kong, and reference there where New Zealand's going. United States, the big supplier there is Australia, because they don't have the option. They send a fair bit to China as well, but they don't have the EU option the way that New Zealand does. Okay, just conscious times moving on. So I'm taking Brexit and trade deals here in the one slide for the next couple of minutes. The deal is, again, as we've talked about up until now on Christmas Eve, has meant that the UK can continue to trade with the EU and vice versa without tariffs. But as we have noticed and has been very prevalent in our news in the context of Northern Ireland, if we can trade without tariffs, because EU controls are being administered at Northern Ireland ports, we have seen the arrival of veterinary certification, customs declarations, and that brings with it its own challenges, shall we say. And I know there's been considerable frustration in the rest of the UK in terms of doing business with mainland Europe. It has been very evident in the fish sector. It has also been evident in the red meat sector. not maybe to the extent, and the people that are really hit in this, and we have seen it here coming in, smaller exporters tend not to be as prepared or have the skill sets or the expertise as a major company. For example, if one of our major meat factories or a major meat factory in England wants to send a 20-ton full container of beef to a market in the continent, that requires one veterinary certificate, it requires one customs declaration. They get that done, they're doing it regularly, and therefore they're familiar with it, and the likelihood is that it's a relatively straightforward process. But we see when it comes to people that are, you know, if it's 20 tons or 20 kilos, you still need the same veterinary certificate. And if you have a whole lot of 20 kilo exports, well, then you're in trouble. What are the solutions to that? And again, we've heard different ideas floated on this. People talk about Switzerland type agreements or Norway type agreements. We in the Farmers Journal actually went and had a look at border points in both of those countries, the Snows, the clue as to which one's Norway. And we had seen there that they have agreements where they basically don't have a veterinary certificate requirement. Norway's in the single market, Switzerland has a veterinary agreement, so that's not an issue. Any delays or inspections there are customs related, and they are quite minimal. So in terms of the dream solution, in terms of trade, whatever the constitutionality of it might mean or the sovereignty of it might mean, the ideal solution is that there is complete veterinary alignment in the style of what Switzerland has, and that would free up trade on goods of animal and plant origin to a serious extent. If we don't get that far, there are other options. Canada negotiated a deal under CETA with the EU a few years ago. They have 10% checks on their animal and plant origin products, compared with 30%, by the way, for the UK. And New Zealand has as low as 1%. So if there is the will there between the UK negotiators and the EU negotiators, there's no doubt that a framework could exist and precedents exist to create that. Now, and of course, we will hear about the deal has been agreed and the deal is signed and that is it. But there is an implementation council, there are technical committees, and I always think if a will is there to get a solution to a problem, well then solutions can be found, but you do need to get that will. The reality, I suppose, from a strictly farming perspective is Brexit deal has been fine so far. You know, it's not interrupted the collection of milk by southern dairies. It hasn't interrupted the sale of lambs going south. It hasn't interrupted Republic of Ireland cattle coming north, either for direct slaughter or for finishing. So at a farm level, it has been okay. At a factory level, of course, and at a retail level, there have been problems there. And, you know, we're a grassland association. I'm not going to go into those, and there are plenty others that can do that much better than I can. When I'm on this point, I suppose it would be right to say something to watch out and look out for in the years ahead. The European Union has a trade deal with Mercosur agreed. It hasn't been ratified yet. That is opening up and adding a market for 99,000 tons of additional South American beef, high quality beef coming into the European Union. That will put pressure on that market. But the one to really watch, and particularly from a sheep meat point of view, is Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand, not so much in sheep meat, but they would have big interest in the UK market for both beef and dairy products. Although they're in dairy at the minute, and they're globally competitive to be there if they want to be. They're focused on China and sheep meat, so maybe not so much to watch there, but certainly Australia, third biggest exporter of beef in the world's largest sheep meat exporter. A trade deal with the European Union for them will inevitably mean more of their product coming into the EU 27. The UK are also in negotiation with both of those countries. A trade deal there will also inevitably mean more of their product coming in to the market. So that's why, from the point of view, and again, I didn't stop and look at the prices on the slide when we went past it, but you will notice if you look back over it that their sheep meat prices, lamb prices, very, very significantly lower than ours. And that is something that could and is likely to be a competition for UK and Northern Ireland lamb, and indeed Republic of Ireland, wider European Union lamb producers, not this year, probably not next year, but certainly in the medium term, it's one that I'd be watching out for. It's also the two exports as well from a beef perspective. I'd be watching out for them as well, that they are also likely to target the EU and particularly the UK, given that the UK is a recognised market, high value market that is a net importer. So those are the points that are worth keeping in mind there. The final topic to just have a quick look at is the PGI application. Again, was a bit of a talking point back in the later part of last year. Republic of Ireland's made an application for grass-fed beef. There's been Northern Ireland, Ulster Farmers Union and various other industry interests in Northern Ireland would have put their hand up to be included and be part of that, because again, if we go back 10, 15 years or thereabouts, we have been down this road before where there was both Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, if you like, we were making a run at the same gate to get a PGI registered for Irish beef. And an agreement or an understanding has been reached, I suppose is the best way to put it, that the Republic of Ireland will go ahead with the application on the basis of their grass-fed standard that has been defined and put in place, but that Northern Ireland will be able to join that at a later point when a Northern Ireland grass-fed standard has been put in place and agreed, provided, of course, that they're successful. How important is this? Look, any extra string that you can have in your bow is worth having, but I would go back to the point where we were earlier in terms of the value of the UK market. The big value for Northern Ireland beef is actually being part of the UK and being part of that domestic market. That's not to say that there's not opportunities for Northern Ireland to present itself as Irish in markets beyond the UK. There's a long history of the Greenfields ban being very successful in the Netherlands with the Albert Heijn supermarket group and would have driven good value there for the suppliers. I picked up a more recent example again, even as the picture at the bottom there, where Kettle Foods, part of the Linton group, would very much market their product as an Irish product in European markets, even though it is sourced and I know all about it is from Northern Ireland. So it's one of those areas where I think if you look at it in the red tractor context, it is the volume premium, if you like, that's worth having. An Irish PGI and being able and having access to that gives us an extra option. It would be useful in niche markets, British for the volume, but not something that will be a game changer, I would feel, north of the border to the extent that it may be south of the border. And that's because of the strong position that we already have with the red tractor. So just to wrap up then, the UK beef market's strong because supply of UK beef is less than the demand from retail. That is the key take-home message there. It's a different picture in sheep meat. It is the European Union that drives the value of British-Irish sheep meat production. And in terms then of global markets and where future growth is likely to come from, if we're taking a 5-year or even a 10-year view of this, China has been the big driver of the past 5 years, maybe more, no doubt. Other markets in Asia are likely to grow as well, probably not as spectacular as China. The difficulty with those is, from a Northern Ireland perspective, beef value at a world price level has to grow dramatically. And we just go back to one of the very early slides there, you can see how South American offerings, New Zealand offerings on beef are always dramatically lower, usually dramatically lower than what we are. If you think of the South American price, the minute run at well under £3 a kilo. The return of the hospitality and normalization in Europe and the UK, it will create and drive demand for non-EU imports again. And it will also be something of a challenge for our sector to hold on to the business that we gained when people were confined to their homes by and large during lockdown. And then finally, securing PGI, it's desirable from a Northern Ireland perspective, very desirable from a Northern Ireland perspective, but not absolutely essential. The big prize is the red tractor. That's it, folks, for me. Happy to take any questions now that you might have there, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Phelim. That has been a whirlwind tour. In fact, I thought I should have brought my passport with me. It's been great, and thank you very much indeed for you've kept the time. And there are a number of questions here which we'll get a start made on. So the first one is, when COVID restrictions are removed and the balance of beef sales shift from retail, are we in for a considerable decrease in beef price?
That's a good question. I sort of alluded to it there at the end, Jim. I think there will be some pressure on it. And One of those questions we simply won't know until it happens. Like, will consumer behavior revert back to where it was this time last year before lockdown, and we consume vast quantities of food on the go, if you like, whether it's the Subway sandwich or the delicatessen at lunchtime or in the evening, whenever? Or will we retain the in-home consumption? Because there's no doubt that people being confined to their homes more has created the opportunity for cooking, which has really suited our products. If I was to get off the fence here, Jim, because I think that's what I'm doing by giving the on one hand and on the other hand, if I was to get off the fence, I think the reality is, yes, that we will see a drop in retail demand, that there will be more product consumed out of the home, greater likelihood that that will be lower value, lower cost imported product, and that then could put some pressure on prices, though not dramatically so, because you know, if you look at consistently, and was take a 10-year view of UK prices, it's always towards the top of the European League, driven very much by that retail presence. So will maybe come under some pressure, but I certainly wouldn't be visualizing a collapse by any means.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Next question. Do you have a year-on-year comparison for total spend on beef in the UK? You know, is the additional spend in retail greater than what has been lost through the service sector?
No, I don't. And to answer that question properly, I would need to have both of those. We have given there an indication that the year-on-year spend is up by, what's it, 12-13%. But we don't have what's lost in the out-of-home eating sector, if you like, the hospitality, the catering sector. But it is much higher than that. We don't have as much. We don't have as big a beef market or indeed sheep meat market as we had when they were open. But that hasn't impacted so much on British or UK beef, because a big part of the volume of the catering hospitality sector is serviced by the imported side. So therefore, we haven't. That's why basically we've had a strong farm gate price for the last 6-9 months or thereabouts. It's because the retail demand is the main outlet for UK origin beef.
Okay, thank you. Mercosur deal agreed. What's the likely outcome, the impact if that happens?
It'll be very bad, certainly from an EU perspective. Probably not great from a UK perspective or UK farming perspective either, because there'll be more beef in the system. But the big thing there, I think, is will that be ratified at this stage? The deal was agreed in June 2019. And at the present, there's no mood in the EU to ratify that. And it's very much to come on trial. You know, the issue of the Brazilian rainforest, you know, part of the deal was to replant was 1 million hectares a year, whereas instead the clearance process has continued. So, and there's also a very, very big, in the last European Parliament elections, the Greens from across Europe would have secured a very, very big mandate in it. And getting a Mercosur trade deal ratified by the European Parliament, never mind the member states, quite a challenge at the minute. And I think that's still some way off, to be honest.
Okay. Next one then is, apart from the seasonal supply and demand of lamb, what threats will cause a reduction in price? You know, what import threats or loss of export opportunities do you foresee?
Good question. Nothing in the immediate future, but as I was saying there just in that last slide, you know, in terms of the trade deals that are most likely to come through fairly quickly, certainly in the UK context, I would expect Australia and New Zealand deals to be wrapped up sooner rather than later. The EU and have been in negotiation with both Australia and New Zealand as well since 2018. That's going to enhance their access for sheep meat to the EU market, particularly in the case of Australia. And whenever that's there as an option, now, okay, it'll be like New Zealand lambs coming into different season and different time of year than us. But when you have more product in that market, when you have society reopened and less, if you like, going through the retail sector, as has been for the past 12 months, then I think that will bring some downward pressure on. How much, I don't know. But it's certainly it's the cloud that, you know, the sheep meat sky and the sheep farming sky at the moment. It's very bright, clear blue. That is the one cloud that I see gathering on the horizon there.
which leads neatly into the next question. Because of the very strong lamb and hogget price, will this continue? Do you want to be the doomsday?
Yeah, and in this business, we don't get paid stockbroker price to go into futures, Jim, and sort of say and call us as to where it'll be. And even if the highest paid financial services advisor in the city of London will always be giving you everything they say comes with the warning about the prices and futures can is it go down as well as up. So having said all that, and looking and basically dealing with what we've had there in terms of the supply side, the size of the market in the European Union, and the fact that New Zealand are so strongly focused on China at the minute, you know, I can't see things changing dramatically this year. Now, maybe if there's a major yield of lambs in the UK this spring, you know, again, it's a shorter production cycle than it is on cattle. If there's a major hit of a major lamb crop this year, then that perhaps could create a bit of an oversupply. And it has been on an exceptional run, if you like, going back over the past couple of years. The other point is, and again, Kevin would like to hear this if he's still listening in, you know, there is the issue of sheep meat perhaps getting too dear at a consumer level, that you know, and we've seen spectacular growth in the consumer spend in the past year. How sustainable is that in the longer term? Who knows? It's probably, you know, if I was to take a guess on this with absolutely no warranty whatsoever, it's probably as good as it gets at the minute. But I don't, again, see anything in the tea leaves there that suggests a reason for a collapse in the coming year either. So, but I can't, and risk terribly being wrong here, I can't see it rising much more, to be quite honest.
You not blame me, Phelim, if it all goes pear-shaped. Given your comments on the now, any thoughts on the alternatives to the Europe grading system now that we're out of Europe?
Yeah, that's something.
Meat yield was popular a few years ago.
That's certainly an option now that the UK can exercise, and very much worth consider everything, look at everything. But the one thing that I'd be cautious about, I wouldn't throw out the EU or OP system with all its flaws. I wouldn't throw it out until I see something to replace it that commands a relative consensus and agreement instead. Meat yield, of course, is the ideal way to go and the perfect way to go. But again, given the world that we live in, I suppose where everyone's maybe thinks that their ugly duck is in reality a swan. If we go into a meat yield situation before we have a serious body of scientific evidence that is understood and accepted by all, then you get into an area of serious controversy very quickly. With all its flaws in the EU or OP system, and a lot of it is now graded by scanner, by camera, then you know, there's a recognition of it as being a system that has by and large worked. It may not give a proper prediction in terms of a U grading carcass versus an R grading carcass, but it gives you a general idea. So look, I would be saying by all means, look at it, explore it, open it. But unless you're pretty close to 100% consensus in changing it, then you could lead for something that no doubt could be better. Unless you get good consensus and buy-in from that across the board, across all the stakeholders, then you could be in for a period of great turbulence and difficulty and strained relationships. So by all means tackle it, by all means change it, but do so with an open mind and very clear need to get everyone on board for it before you do it.
This one here is given your comments on the use of imported beef in the service sector, is it not time for a wide-reaching marketing campaign to make the public aware of this and increase their demand for locally produced beef?
Well, again, you know, if you go back through the presentation there and we looked at the supermarket trade, you know, there is a good demand, you know, and that demand is actually driven by the supermarkets themselves. Consumers are a pretty fickle bunch because, again, if you survey any of them, they will always tell you about how loyal they are to local produce, how much they love and appreciate and pay for, and will happily pay more for organic produce and all of those things. The reality is when they come to doing their shopping, I remember seeing research one time that it's a millisecond that consumers give in terms of making their choice. And most likely of all, the factor that will drive their choice is actually the price point that catches their eye. So in terms of running campaigns, I'm not saying don't do them, but have realistic expectations to what they might deliver. We all have to be marketeers in this business, whether we're a farmer that's calving cows or lambing ewes or milking cows. We have to all be marketeers as well, and be mindful of that, and be mindful in terms of how we run our business, that, you know, we're only ever somebody doing a 10-second clip with a mobile phone to destroy the reputation of our sector. So I don't know that we can do an awful lot more there in terms of getting consumer loyalty. We have to give them value and be aware that they're a fickle bunch.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to be down to maybe my last three questions because time's marching on. The finger is pointed at the red meat sector, re climate change. How big a risk are these concerns to demand the price going forward? You know, and
yeah,
like everything you look at climate change, they say, "Oh, stop eating red meat."
Yeah, and I think in terms of where we could do with not a local, national, but a global campaign, I think that is the area where there's perhaps the most pushback needed, and you know, and more so and more effective perhaps than trying to say, well, look, you know, Scotch beef is always better than Welsh beef, and of course we know that Northern Irish beef's best. You know, rather than focus too much of energy in that there, I think we need to be looking at that bigger picture and challenging the climate change debate, or taking part in that climate change debate. There's a huge volume of what you would call loud and fairly articulate opinion that does identify, and of course it's easy to do it. You know, it's very easy for someone to say, look, I'll forsake maybe red meat here. I'm not going to forsake my car. I'm certainly not going to run my house temperature at 2 or 3 degrees lower on a consistent basis. And all of those things, transport and buildings, are much bigger users and cause much more damage to the environment than the global cattle population does. And that's not to say that we can be complacent on it. I just you know, noted a couple of other points there in terms of the threat then, and, you know, the push to go vegetarian and go vegan, etc., to avoid animal products. I thought it was fascinating this year. The January is always allocated as a veganery month, the month of the year when the big push is made to promote vegetarianism. And I thought it was fascinating this year that compared with January last year, that the vegan products lost market share actually. So not maybe as major a threat, the meat alternatives, as we might think, but we cannot be slack in any way in terms of the environment. And someone certainly at an EU level, it's a separate debate in the UK perhaps now, but at an EU level, there's a huge pressure on through this farm to fork strategy, the ambition of having the EU the world's first carbon neutral continent by 2050. And that has led to Commission policy now very much moving away from a common agriculture policy to what I would call a common environment policy, where it is very much about farmers being paid and supported for environmental maintenance and organic farming. Like they want 25% of EU land to go into organic production. You know, how that pans out, heaven only knows. But those are the things to keep in mind on, and that is the policy level where I think as lobby organizations that we need to be, space that we need to be active in. And look, we can't get away from the fact that ruminant livestock produce methane. That's a fact of life. What we have to try and do is get it contextualized and keep all the time shining the torch on just at a global, at a UK level, at a European level, just how small a percentage of the total emissions that do come from agriculture. It would be my thoughts there, Jim.
This is the penultimate question, and it's environmental again. What's the biggest threat to the red tractor sector? Is it environmental concerns or lab-grown protein?
Not just after we said there about vegan, I'm not as concerned about lab-grown proteins, although they're going to be there, but I think they're just going to be an additional and an extra consumer choice. But I think that the core animal-based proteins, that the market for those will remain strong long into the future. In terms of red tractor, look, we have to be conscious of, we've talked about the environment, we've talked about carbon. The other thing that we have to be very conscious of and sensitive about is the whole issue of animal welfare. Those of us that are actively involved in farming know that you know, it's the equivalent of breaking eggs to make the omelette. Not every farm is run in a picture postcard way, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are times when things go wrong. And you know that we have to be very, very mindful that we're only ever, say, a 20 or 30-second mobile phone clip of bad on-farm practice or bad in-factory practice handling of livestock. That could cost us more consumers at the flick of a switch than absolutely anything else, I think, to do with our sector. So, you know, those things that are there, we think, when we think of quality assurance schemes and the pain in the neck that they can be to us when that inspection comes around to us, you know, the reality is that they're very much a validation of the fact that we're complying with what is essentially legislation anyway. And therefore, we have to some extent grin and bear it. And going back, and again, I go back to the prices that are available consistently better in the UK than most other countries in the world, then that is the dividend we get. Whether it's a good enough dividend or not is another debate, but it's certainly worth a dividend.
Thank you, Philip. This is going to be the last question, and this is more to do with your crystal ball. Will lower live exports, particularly dairy origin cows from the Republic of Ireland, have much impact on beef price in 12 to 18 months down the line?
Big issue in the Republic of Ireland, dairy calves and the management of those, and we talk about animal welfare issues. You know, the European Union is raising the bar all the time and making live exports more difficult, and yet the reality, commercially rearing those and bringing them forward to beef brings with it a problem. And whilst the meat processing industry mightn't agree with me, I always, in terms of benchmarking the Republic of Ireland price, it tends to be at its lowest when the annual kill is at its highest. And you know, if they're running the peak there, 2019, thinking about 1.8 million cattle slaughtered, and 1.75 or something like that last year. But if you bring in a big influx of those animals, then you know that's inevitably going to have some downward pressure at farm gate level. The only point that I would make is if they can be commercially reared and produced, you know, that dairy bred calf, well, it's not really going to be supplying steak meat into the top restaurants of the UK or Europe. The reality is now that 60% of our carcass is sold in ground beef in one way or another. You know, the Dawn Meats Group in particular would have a major supply contract with McDonald's. So there is, you know, and the Republic of Ireland would have established itself in the manufacturing beef market in the United States as well. So there is a market for that manufactured product. The difficulty is the farmers that are rearing those, and we have a program going on at the minute, a dairy calf to beef program. In fact, there's a competing webinar tonight south of the border on the subject. The challenge is to be able to rear those and process them in a commercially viable way. If that can be done, well then look, there's a business there, there's no question.
Thank you, Philip. That has been superb. And thanks also to Kevin for their presentations. This has been superb. I'm going to hand back to Charlie now. And thank you to the people that have been here all through this time. Thank you indeed.
Jim, thanks very much for chairing that. Philip, thanks very much for a very comprehensive presentation. I just want to give a few thank yous to people before we close for the night. Thanks to the two speakers for the time taken to prepare and deliver two very informative and thought-provoking papers tonight. I'll go back and I think of Kevin, and I look what Kevin has done. 10 to 15 years ago, an average to poor sheep farming system with average performance, and he's turned that to top-class performance. He's been prepared to make significant changes. He's taken his business in a new direction. And through an open-minded approach, with attention to detail through production efficiency, prudent financial management and marketing. And certainly, I just go back, the quote of the evening, which I liked, it's not what you hay, it's what you do with what you hay. That's something I think comes to us all, what resources we have and using what we have to our best ability. Then we come on to Philip, and Philip gave us a whirlwind tour around the world. Something I find very interesting. I'm a beef producer myself, interested in where everything comes and where it goes. a global meat marketing perspective. And perhaps, I hear a lot of doom and gloom about red meat. And I think it was a more of an optimistic message tonight. Although it was a 12.5% increase in sales due to retail sales, that may not keep up, but it still looks good. There's a threat of Mercosur there. It doesn't seem to be as big a threat as the same thing with this. And maybe the environmental and vegans, we hear the minorities doing a lot of shouting. Is it as bad as what we think it is? And I say, coming back to PGI, and maybe this complements Kevin's, red meat from grass. And this is what the environmentalists want, to reduce their carbon footprint. Thank you both very much. And if we could have a round of applause, I'd like to have that for both of you. It's been an excellent evening. Thank you, and both. Now, just going back, other thanks. This is the first time we've had our conference in this format, and it's actually worked out better than I thought. It's come out very well. We've had a lot of questions. I have to give special thanks to our General Manager of Ag Research, Jason Rankin, because he has been in the control seat of this tonight. He's helped set us up, and he's managed the whole webinar of technology to allow the successful delivery of this evening's event. I always never like to go on without talking about the quiet man and also Grassland Society. He's there hidden up there somewhere. George Reid, he's our secretary, and he does more work than anybody, and you don't hear a peep out of him. And he's worked tirelessly to coordinate this meeting and presentations. And not only that, he keeps as I say, the engine room of the Ulster Grassland Society going year on year. Thanks, George. Lastly, before we fold up, and I say thanks to our man here, my mentor, Jim Freeburn. He was the president before me, has kept me right. Thanks for chairing things, Jim. You did a great job. Most importantly, thanks to the audience, 135 checked in tonight. This is probably as many as we get in a live audience. And thank you for taking time to attend this event, albeit it was virtually. Thank you very much, folks. And that's it. Now, I'd just like to promote, we're moving on to the dairy sector tomorrow night. I think we've well and truly covered beef tonight, and hopefully tomorrow night goes as well as tonight as well. Thank you very, very much, folks, for a great evening. Thank you.